member of House of Representatives, Honorable Golu Timothy, representing Panchin, Kante, and Kanem Federal Constituency, has challenged the presidency to name the alleged politician who are sponsoring the killings across the country. It will be recalled that the presidency has several occasions said politicians as the ones sponsoring the wanton killing across the country. In a chat with Ben TV in Abuja, Honorable Golu Timothy said the presidency is using a blame game to shirk its responsibility of providing adequate security for lives and property in the country.
That is laughable. That is laughable. Which politician? They are also politicians now. So if we are playing football and then they score a goal, you don't know who scored the goal? How can you be playing the game together and you say, then it means you are not competent to be in that place? You should identify the people. If you say so, they are embarrassing themselves. They are exposing their incompetence. How can you say that somebody is a police? They thought that using that kind of general terms, it is old-fashioned. It is old-fashioned that when you come outside and you see something happening, you say, they are politicians again. Just like sometimes people blame the National Assembly. You know, we approve the budget, we pass the budget, the president signed it, and then when he refused to implement, they say, what is the National Assembly doing? The National Assembly, there is separation of power. Our own is to make laws, oversight, and represent. Somebody is to implement. If the person do not implement, that is no longer the work of the National Assembly. Our own is to raise the issues. We have done our own. Why can't this man? The nation should look at the person who has refused to implement, but they will push it. It's just like that. We, among ourselves, how can we say if a politician is involved, the man is in charge of the security of this country, he controls the DSS, the police, the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Civil Defense, everything, the immigration. And yet he say he don't know who is doing this kind of a thing. So who should we blame? Do we blame God for it now?
He also supports the call for the establishment of the state police as a part of the measure to address the insecurity in the country. Meanwhile, Honorable Timothy has attributed the current crisis in Plateau State to the intruder who wanted to displace the people of the Plateau from their ancestral land.
The recent crisis, I will say, can be alluded to the quest to dominate Plateau, to take over our land. By outsiders, by some forces, the forces that are killing our people. People come there from nowhere to come and stay. And it all behoves that if you are going to a place, we have never said because we are indigenous, so no citizens of Nigeria can not come and stay in our place. We respect everybody. So if you are coming to our place, show that respect. We give you land to stay. We allow you to stay. We cannot send anybody, and we have never sent anybody. But somebody who wants to stay there and take over the land that was given to him to stay for no reason. If you come to this place and then you are allowed to occupy this portion of the land, as long as you don't lay claim and ownership to it, you can be making use of that land for as long as you want to make use of it. You can be making use of it for as long as you are alive. But the day you begin to lay ownership to that land, which means that you begin to establish yourself as the chief of that place, you begin to see yourself as equal to the people that own that place, you begin to even get to a level where you allocate this same land to other people in the name of ownership, a new ownership under you. Crisis has begun.
It will be recalled that several people have lost their life in the recent herdsmen and farmers crisis in Plateau State.
The 25th anniversary and annual general meetings of the African Export-Import Bank has opened in Abuja. The meeting is open to the banking industry professionals, trade and trade finance practitioners, and other stakeholders involved in economic development from across Africa and beyond. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa urged Nigeria to sign the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement 49 African countries have signed the agreement, leaving Nigeria and others. The AfCFTA is expected to cover 1.2 billion Africans with gross domestic product of $2.5 trillion. The agreement is expected to increase intra-African trade from the current 16% to 53% with the corresponding GDP growth and increased employment and job creation in the continent. Ramaphosa also spoke about the need for collaboration between the private and public sector to bridge the huge infrastructure deficit on the continent.
Agreement is pregnant with a lot of other possibilities, opportunities, and of course challenges. And of course along the way there will also be problems and conflicts. But we should start off by looking more at the opportunities, where we will through this agreement be able to trade much more effectively with one another, where goods that are traded across the continent will be devoid of tariffs, and that will lead to a greater demand amongst consumers right across the continent. And that will also lead to business people beginning to see the real opportunities of making and manufacturing goods. So I see this as a stimulant for the manufacturing base on our continent, the industrialization of our continent, and this is where we will do this at the confluence of the fourth industrial revolution, as well as mixing it up with this opportunity that is being yielded by the CFTA.
Nigeria's Finance Minister Kemi Adeosun said the country was taking its time to look at the pros and cons of the AfCFTA before signing. Adeosun said the African Trade Agreement was too important for the country to sign without making sure that the interest of its people was protected. The minister therefore called on Afrexim Bank to invest more in the area of infrastructure development with a view to promoting trade and investment on the continent.
Summarize Nigeria's position. We must consult. This is a federation of states, of local governments, and there are many stakeholders. And so we must go through a process of consultation, and that's simply what we're doing, or are concluding now. And that really is Nigeria's position, and there have been consultations across the country, various groups, manufacturers groups, employers groups, people that had genuine and legitimate questions which needed to be answered. We said, how does this affect me? And so we've gone out and done that consultation because it is, as the President said correctly, an extremely important move for Africa, and therefore it's got to be done right. We must never be in a hurry to get things wrong. We must get things right. We must do all the due process so that when you put ink to paper, you can put your hand on your heart and say, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. So that's simply what has been undertaken in the last few months. So that's the answer to Nigeria's position. Thank you.
Benedict Orama, Afrexim Bank President and CEO, earlier said about $8 billion has so far been released to most countries for infrastructure development and trade promotion. Orama also said the bank will distribute $25 billion to support intra-African trade from now to 2025.
It is important that the CFTA be thoroughly debated so that everyone understands the opportunities that it offers and the obstacles that we must collectively overcome to realize its potentials. Afrexim Bank has in place in support of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the intra-African trade in general. Some of these include a strategy to disburse an amount of $25 billion in support of intra-African trade by the end of 2021. And I tell you, in 2017 alone, we did $8 billion.
Meanwhile, Afrexim Bank has signed a €500 million agreement with the Development Bank of the Central African States, BDEAC. BDEAC is a multilateral development bank that is charged with financing the development of member states. Osman Raffle, Ben Television.
Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, has reiterated the commitment of the federal government to ensure that electricity consumers are billed with the use of prepaid meters. Feeding questions from State House correspondents after the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja, Fashola said though some of the powers the minister had were removed with privatization policy, the government is, however, not helpless.
As to what I am doing to enforce the supply of meters, the control that the Minister of Power before me, before 2013, had over PHCN, all of his assets and all of that, has been taken by the privatization of the sector. But as a people and as a government, we are not helpless, because the powers that the minister used to have are the powers that are now vested in NERC, the National Electricity Regulatory Commission. That is the regulator of the system. That is the central bank of the power system. So that is what we have, and it's important for you and I to have that common understanding, because it is an understanding necessitated by law. The Ministry of Power now has barely 1,000 staff from almost 50,000. This is the consequence of privatization. But as minister, I have powers to issue policy directions, which I just did again. I've issued many policy directions. I just issued one about 2 days ago, directing NERC to do its job, because that is the agency now who now does the job. Directing MBET, who is the contracting party with the discos, who sells power to them, to do its job. And directing BPE under the National Council of Privatization to also enforce its contract, because they signed the contracts, not the ministry. So in the way that NCC has acted without the Minister for Information when there were violations, NERC should do its job. If you read my press briefing, one of the things I adverted NERC's attention to is the powers that it has under Section 73 and 74 of the law to amend an existing license or entirely revoke it where the party has not discharged the terms of his license. I will not abdicate my responsibility and commitment of this government to improve service, and you will see that service has improved in some respect. Generation is up. Distribution needs to catch up. But there are clear statutory and legal limits to what I can do as minister in order not to send a wrong message to investors.
Some memos for road projects in Ikom, South Nigeria also made it to the Federal Executive Council meeting, as made known by Tunde Fashola. From Abuja, and Festus Ijiroga Nefifen for Ben Television.
The House of Representatives had demanded the suspension of President Muhammadu Buhari Executive Order 6. The order seeks to restrain owner of assets under investigation from carrying out any further transaction on such assets. The President, on July 5, 2018, signed the executive order which will prevent any government official from engaging in corrupt practices such as misappropriation of state assets for personal gain, receive any form of bribe, or engage in corrupt practices related to the performance of his or her duties. Debating on the issue during the plenary, the lawmaker called for an investigation into the constitutional compliance of all subsidiary legislation and executive orders by the executive arm of government. According to the motion sponsored by Honorable Nicholas Osai and supported by 27 other lawmakers, the Executive Order Number 6 of 2018, signed by President Muhammadu Buhari, appeared to hijack and usurp legislative and judicial powers. With the signing of the Executive Order 6, President Buhari sanctions clamped down on assets said to have been allegedly corruptly acquired by top government officials, either directly or through their front over the years.
To the United States of America, which will copy the presidential system of government. When you watch the constitution of the United States government, which is the grand norm, which is the operational compass upon which the United States government rests its legislative powers. Mr. Speaker, this operational compass, which is our constitution, does not recognize executive order in the first place. So it's foreign to our constitution. Mr. Speaker, and if the legislature that represents over 200 million Nigeria cannot rise up to the occasion to challenge the essence of having the legislative house with double chamber is to correct the autocracy of the executive. And Mr. Speaker, the essence of checks and balances embedded in the doctrine of separation of power, Mr. Power, the checks and balances is to correct autocracy. And Mr. Speaker, this motion is acting in line with the doctrine of the separation of power 1, the principle of checks and balances 2. Mr. Speaker, this is the reason why this motion is coming at this particular point in time. Mr. Speaker, Nigerians have cried, are we going back to the military eras? The answer the representative of the people should answer is that enough is enough for these issues. And if the House on its own allow its function to be usurped by executive, it lies on all of us.
Speaking against the motion, Honorable Majid Alabi, representing Osun West, said the executive order is in good faith and does not infringe on the legitimate right of a citizen. Noting presidency order is not illegal and it is not unconstitutional.
So when I came into the chamber and I learned about this motion, I felt elated. Unfortunately, when I went through the tenure of the motion, I came to the conclusion that the motion is not only incompetent, it is also hasty and premature. On this ground, I want to raise 3 questions. The first question is, has the president the power to make executive orders? I answer in the affirmative by saying yes. I listened to my colleague referring to the United States of America, and you know the U.S. Constitution is so compact that you can easily read it, and there is no section of the Constitution that says the president of the United States of America must use executive powers. Yet, the constitutional law of the United States today will be incomplete without presidential orders. So presidential orders have grown over the years out of usages in the same way that the powers of presiding officers of the legislature have grown over the ages by use and passages. Therefore, presidential order, even under the Nigerian constitutional law, is not illegal and is not unconstitutional. Mr. Speaker, I have looked also at the Constitution. There is no express prohibition of the use of presidential orders. Thirdly, even when you look at the tenure of this motion, the second leg, the third leg, they are saying to constitute a committee to scrutinize and investigate all subsidiary legislation and executive orders. The implication of that is that this particular motion also recognizes the fact that there have been executive orders over the years.
The executive order number 6 has, however, attracted criticism from some Nigerians who questioned its constitutionality. From Abuja, Muyiwa Bamdele reporting.